You've just been promoted to head monk of Please Don't Die First. Welcome to brutal history for sleep, where bedtime stories begin with prayer, end with screaming, and sometimes feature a saint's skull worn like a novelty hat. If you enjoy drifting off to softly narrated historical panic, like, subscribe, and let me know where in the world you're watching from and what time your suffering starts. It's 793 AD. The Vikings are coming. You'll chant, illuminate, and try not to cry as unfamiliar ships bring very familiar violence. Now, lie still and prepare to lose everything sacred, quietly. Picture yourself on a small island off the coast of Northumbria in the year 793. You're surrounded by grey stone walls, the sound of waves lapping against rocky shores, and the gentle scratch of quill on parchment. Welcome to Lindisfarne, where you've been living the monastic life for, let's say long enough to have opinions about proper Latin pronunciation and the theological implications of too much butter on your bread. Your days follow a predictable rhythm. You wake before dawn for prayers, spend hours copying manuscripts with the dedication of someone who genuinely believes misspelling hallelujah might damn your immortal soul, and engage in spirited debates about whether St. Cuthbert's toenails were actually miraculous or just really well maintained. It's peaceful, it's holy, it's mind-numbingly routine. But across the North Sea, you have neighbours you've never met. They live in longhouses that smell like fish and wood smoke, where the dinner conversation revolves around whose turn it is to raid the neighbours, and whether that new axe really needs a blood groove, or if that's just showing off. These neighbours have been watching the coastlines, listening to traders' tales, and developing what you might charitably call an entrepreneurial spirit. You see, while you've been illuminating the letter M with tiny golden angels, they've been loading their ships with weapons, dried meat, and the kind of enthusiasm that comes from long winters with nothing to do but sharpen things and nurse grudges. They've heard about these strange stone buildings, full of men who don't fight back, stuffed with gold and silver objects that apparently just sit there, unguarded, waiting to be appreciated by people with better taste in jewellery. The leader of this particular expedition, let's call him Ragnar because they're all called Ragnar, has been planning this trip like you plan your evening prayers, methodically, with purpose, and with the absolute certainty that God or gods, or whoever's listening, clearly wants him to sail south and see what all the fuss is about regarding these monasteries. As you kneel in the chapel for morning prayers, completely unaware that your quiet island life is about to become significantly more exciting, Ragnar is checking the wind direction and making sure everyone remembered to bring enough rope, because you're going to need rope. You always need rope. The irony is delicious, really. While you're praying for peace and divine protection, asking God to keep you safe from the storms and tribulations of the world, a dozen longships are cutting through those very storms, their dragon prows pointed directly at your morning routine. Your king, Aethelred, is busy with more pressing matters than coastal defence. He's dealing with the usual royal problems, which nobles are plotting against him this week, whether his food taster is reliable, and how to look piously Christian while systematically looting his own churches for tax money. The idea that someone might actually sail across the sea specifically to cause trouble hasn't really occurred to anyone in charge. After all, who would be mad enough to cross the North Sea in wooden boats just to steal church furniture? You're about to find out. As you dip your quill in ink, preparing to add another flourish to the letter B in Blessed Are the Meek, the wind is picking up outside. The waves are getting rougher, and somewhere out there, just beyond the horizon, several dozen men with impressive beards and questionable hygiene are rowing toward you with the single-minded determination of people who've run out of things to steal at home. Brother Aldrich, who's been working on the same psalm for 3 weeks because he keeps getting distracted by theological questions about sheep, looks up from his manuscript and comments that the weather seems to be turning. You both nod sagely, because monks are excellent at stating the obvious, and return to your work. Neither of you mentions that the wind sounds different today, hungrier somehow, like it's carrying something new toward your peaceful little island, something that's going to make your quiet life of prayer and manuscript copying significantly more memorable. The storm clouds are gathering, and they're not just bringing rain. You're in the middle of copying a particularly tricky passage about divine mercy when the storm hits. The wind howls around the monastery walls like it's trying to get inside for morning prayers, and the rain hammers against the windows with the enthusiasm of someone who's been holding it in for hours. You and your fellow monks exchange knowing looks. Obviously, this is another sign of God's displeasure with the world. Perhaps it's about the bishop's new hat, which everyone agrees is unnecessarily elaborate. Or maybe it's divine commentary on Brother Marcus's tendency to fall asleep during Vespers. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and apparently sometimes those ways involve dramatic weather. Brother Aldrich suggests you should all pray harder. Brother Thomas thinks you should check the roof tiles. You're in the middle of deciding whether this storm calls for the regular prayers or the special weather prayers when you hear something that definitely isn't thunder. It's shouting, in a language that sounds like someone gargling gravel while trying to remember how to count to 10. You peer through the rain-streaked window and see something that makes your carefully maintained theological worldview wobble on its foundations. Ships. Long, narrow ships with carved dragon heads cutting through the waves like they were built specifically to make dramatic entrances during storms. For a moment you stand there, holding your quill, trying to process what you're seeing. These aren't the trading vessels you occasionally see limping toward shore with holds full of wool and disappointing fish. These ships move like predators, and they're heading directly for your beach with the kind of purposeful speed that suggests their occupants have plans. Specific plans. Plans that probably don't involve joining you for evening prayers. The first longship hits the beach with a grinding crash that you can hear even over the storm. Then another. Then another. Men leap out into the surf, and even from a distance you can see they're carrying things. Sharp things. Shiny things. Things that are definitely not prayer books. Brother Aldrich drops his manuscript. The ink spreads across the parchment like a small black prophecy of doom. "Pirates," he whispers, because even in crisis, monks whisper in libraries. You're about to correct him. Surely these are just merchants with unusually aggressive marketing strategies, when the shouting gets closer. Much closer, and it becomes very clear that whatever these men are yelling, it's not a request for directions to the nearest inn. The monastery bells start ringing, not for prayers but for panic. Someone, probably Brother Thomas, who's always had good survival instincts, is pulling the bell rope like he's trying to wake the dead. The sound echoes across the island, mixing with the storm and the increasingly enthusiastic roaring from the beach. You can see them now, running up from the shore. Tall men with long hair and longer weapons, moving with the confidence of people who've done this before. They spread out like they're following a plan, which is somehow more terrifying than if they were just wandering around aimlessly. One of them, a giant with a beard that could house a family of sparrows, kicks open the monastery gate with the casual efficiency of someone opening a door to check the weather. Behind him, his companions pour through the opening like water through a broken dam, and suddenly your peaceful morning routine is interrupted by the distinctive sound of Vikings having a really good time. "Sanctuary!" shouts Brother Marcus, forgetting that sanctuary only works if the people breaking in understand the concept. These particular visitors seem more interested in the practical applications of their axes than in the finer points of ecclesiastical law. You drop your quill, which, let's be honest, seems less important now, and join the general scramble for safety. But where do you hide in a monastery? Everything is made of stone, everything echoes, and the Vikings seem to have an excellent sense of direction when it comes to finding things worth taking. Brother Sebastian tries to defend the altar with a wooden spoon, because apparently when faced with armed raiders, his mind immediately went to kitchen utensils. It's touching, really. Completely useless, but touching. The Vikings spread through the monastery like they're shopping with a very specific list. Gold candlesticks? Check. Silver chalices? Absolutely. That illuminated Bible you've been working on for 6 months? Well, the gold leaf might be worth something, and the parchment could always be used for more practical purposes. One of them stops in front of your abandoned manuscript, tilts his head like a confused dog, and then shrugs. He picks up your quill, examines it briefly, and sticks it behind his ear like a souvenir. Months of careful work, and it's become a barbarian hair accessory. The sound is indescribable, Latin prayers mixing with Old Norse battle cries, the crash of furniture being enthusiastically rearranged, the tinkle of broken glass, and underneath it all, the steady patter of rain that suggests God is watching this entire spectacle, and has decided not to intervene. You realize you're holding your breath, crouched behind a pillar that's definitely not large enough to hide a grown monk. Around you, your brothers are discovering that years of peaceful contemplation haven't adequately prepared them for home invasion by enthusiastic Scandinavians. Welcome to the Viking Age. It's louder than you expected. You're pressed against the cold stone pillar, listening to your monastery being systematically dismantled by people who clearly never learned proper library etiquette. The sounds are getting more creative now, crashes, thuds, and what you're pretty sure is someone trying to play the church organ with an axe handle. From your hiding spot, you can see one of the raiders examining St. Cuthbert's reliquary like he's window shopping. He holds up the ornate golden box, shakes it gently to hear the contents rattle, and nods approvingly. Nice craftsmanship, his expression seems to say. I'll take it. The fact that it contains the sacred fingerbone of a beloved saint appears to be less important than the quality of the goldwork. You watch in horrified fascination as he tucks it under his arm like a lunchbox and moves on to evaluate your silver candlesticks. Another raider has discovered the wine cellar. This was inevitable, really. You can tell because the shouting has become more musical, and someone appears to be attempting to sing a drinking song in harmony with Brother Marcus's terrified prayers. The combination is surprisingly melodic, though probably not what St. Benedict had in mind when he wrote the rules for monastic life. A third Viking, this one with braids that suggest he takes personal grooming very seriously, has found your scriptorium. He's holding up one of your finest illuminated manuscript, squinting at the tiny golden angels you spent weeks perfecting. For a moment, you hope he might appreciate the artistry. Then he tears out a page, examines it closely, and uses it to wipe something off his axe blade. 6 months of work? Gone. Used as a Viking napkin. The systematic looting continues with the efficiency of people who've clearly done this before. They work in teams, one person to smash open containers, one to evaluate contents, one to carry away anything remotely valuable. It's like watching a very violent, very loud moving company. You notice that one of them has found Brother Thomas's collection of unusual rocks, his pride and joy, gathered over years of contemplative walks around the island. The Viking picks up Thomas's favourite piece of quartz, examines it briefly, and throws it over his shoulder with the dismissive gesture of someone who's seen better rocks. Thomas, hiding behind the baptismal font, makes a small whimpering sound. The raiders seem particularly excited about anything that shines. Your bronze bell gets enthusiastic attention until they realize it's too heavy to carry easily. Your silver-inlaid prayer book disappears into someone's sack. Even the brass hinges on the chapel door get examined with professional interest. One Viking has discovered the monastery's skull collection, carefully preserved relics of various saints that you've been dutifully maintaining for generations. He tries one on like a helmet, decides it doesn't fit properly, and hands it to his companion, who uses it as a drinking cup. You're pretty sure St. Oswald never intended his remains to be party accessories, but here we are. Meanwhile, another raider has found the holy oil and is apparently trying to baptize himself, just in case it might come in handy later. He pours it over his head with the same casual approach he'd use for washing, then looks around expectantly, as if waiting for divine inspiration, or at least a small miracle. When nothing immediately happens, he shrugs and goes back to looking for things to steal. The one with your quill behind his ear has discovered that the monastery keeps chickens. You can hear him chasing them around the courtyard, shouting what you assume are Old Norse expressions of farmyard frustrations. The chickens, sensibly, are having none of it. Brother Aldrich, still clutching his ruined manuscript, whispers desperately, "Why don't they just take the gold and leave?" It's a reasonable question. Professional raiders should be more efficient than this. But you're beginning to understand that this isn't just about the loot. These men are having fun. Genuine, wholehearted fun. They're like children who've been let loose in a toy shop, except the toys are your life's work and the children have weapons. One of them slips on some spilled wine. Apparently the cellar investigation got enthusiastic, and takes out a candle stand on his way down. He lies there for a moment, laughing at his own clumsiness, then gets up and kicks the fallen candle stand for good measure. It's the kind of casual destruction that would be endearing if it weren't happening to your home. You can see them loading their ships now, passing golden chalices hand to hand like they're helping a friend move house. Someone has organised the loot into piles based on size and shininess. There's a brief argument about whether that particular silver plate is worth the carrying space, resolved when someone points out that it would make an excellent shield in a pinch. As you watch your monastery being efficiently stripped of everything valuable, portable and shiny, you realise this is probably going to make for a very interesting report to the bishop, assuming you survive to write one. The rain is still falling, washing the blood from various minor injuries, mostly Vikings who got over-enthusiastic with their axe work, and turning the monastery courtyard into a muddy chaos of footprints, scattered parchment, and the occasional bewildered chicken. You're witnessing history being made. It's messier than the books suggested it would be. 3 days later, you're sitting in the ruins of your scriptorium, trying to salvage what's left of your life's work when the royal messengers arrive. They gallop up to what remains of your gate with the frantic energy of men who've been riding hard and stopping only to change horses and spread panic. The lead messenger dismounts, looks around at the smouldering remains of your peaceful monastery, and delivers the kind of news that really should come with a warning label. His Majesty King Ethelred requires a full report of what transpired here. You exchange glances with Brother Aldric, who's been sitting in the same spot since the raid ended, staring at a torn page from his favourite psalm. How exactly do you explain to your king that a bunch of foreigners sailed across the North Sea, kicked down your door, stole everything shiny, and sailed away again while singing drinking songs? The messenger is still talking, his voice getting higher with each word. His Majesty wishes to know the number of attackers, their weapons, their tactics, and why nobody thought to send word that pirates were approaching the coast. You want to point out that you were rather busy hiding behind pillars and watching your life's work being used as Viking napkins, but royal messengers aren't known for their sense of humour. Meanwhile, back in his royal hall, King Aethelred is having what historians will diplomatically call a moment. The news of the Lindisfarne raid has reached him just as he was sitting down to breakfast, and he's responding with all the calm dignity of a man who's just been told his house is on fire and his only bucket has a hole in it. "Team, I came from where?" he shouts, stabbing his eating knife into the wooden table for emphasis. "Across the sea? In boats?" His advisors shift nervously. Nobody wants to be the one to explain that yes, the North Sea is definitely crossable if you have the right boats, and a complete disregard for reasonable weather conditions. "Why," the king continues, his voice reaching the kind of pitch usually reserved for religious ecstasy or complete panic, "do we not have boats? Why do we not have men with boats? Why are we sitting here like sheep waiting for wolves?" Lord Aelfric, who's brave enough to state the obvious, clears his throat. "Your Majesty, we do have boats. Fishing boats. They're just smaller. They smell like herring." This doesn't improve the king's mood. The royal council erupts into the kind of productive discussion you'd expect from men who've never had to deal with seaborne raiders before. Someone suggests building bigger boats. Someone else points out that building boats takes time, and the Vikings probably aren't going to wait politely while Northumbria develops a navy. Lord Godwin, who's always been more practical than popular, suggests that maybe they should focus on defending the places that are most likely to be attacked next. After all, he says, they've shown they can get here. They're probably not going to stop with one monastery. He's immediately shouted down by 3 other lords, who insist that the raid was obviously a one-time event, probably the result of some Vikings getting lost on their way to somewhere else. "They were probably looking for Denmark," Lord Ethelbald insists. "Navigation error. These things happen." You'd find this touching optimism charming if your scriptorium wasn't currently a pile of ash and soggy parchment. The king decides the situation calls for decisive action. He orders more prayers, stronger locks, and a strongly worded letter to be sent to the King of Norway, assuming someone can figure out where exactly Norway is and whether they have a postal system. "Tell them," Aethelred declares, waving his eating knife like a sceptre, "that King Aethelred of Northumbria is very disappointed in their behaviour and expects better in the future." You suspect this letter will be about as effective as Brother Sebastian's wooden spoon, but nobody asks your opinion. The royal scribes dutifully record every word of the king's pronouncements, their beautiful handwriting capturing panic in elegant calligraphy. The official record will read, In the year of our Lord 793, heathen raiders did arrive by sea and did commit various depredations upon the holy island of Lindisfarne, to the great sorrow and alarm of all Christian folk. It doesn't mention the skull hat, the chicken chase, or the Viking who tried to baptize himself with holy oil. History, you're learning, is surprisingly selective about details. As the messengers prepare to carry news of the raid to other kingdoms, you realize that your quiet little monastery has become the opening chapter of something much larger. Other kings will hear about Lindisfarne. Other coastlines will start looking nervously at the horizon. But right now, King Ethelred is still shouting about boats, his advisors are still arguing about whether Vikings can navigate, and you're still sitting in the ruins of your scriptorium, holding a half-burned page from the book of Matthew and wondering if this is how ages end. With shouting, and really poor crisis management. While you're sitting in your ruined monastery counting the cost of your encounter with Scandinavian entrepreneurship, the raiders themselves are halfway home, their longships heavy with loot, and their spirits high with the kind of satisfaction that comes from a job well done. Ragnar, yes, his name really is Ragnar because apparently Viking parents weren't very creative, is steering his ship through choppy seas while mentally composing the story he's going to tell when he gets home. In his version, the monastery was defended by at least 50 armed monks, possibly with magical powers. The gold was cursed, which explains why it took so much courage to steal it, and there was definitely a dragon involved somewhere, because what's the point of a good raid story without a dragon? His crew is making similar improvements to reality. Bjorn, the slightly smaller, claims he single-handedly fought off 20 monks with nothing but a belt buckle and righteous fury. Eric, the surprisingly articulate, insists that the Christian god himself appeared to challenge him to single combat, and obviously Eric won because here he is, alive and carrying a very nice silver chalice. The loot gets passed around and examined like trophies. Your golden candlesticks are admired for their craftsmanship. St. Cuthbert's reliquary is opened so everyone can look at the finger bone inside, which they assume must have belonged to someone very important, judging by the quality of the container. "Think it's magic?" asks Olaf, the perpetually optimistic, holding the bone up to the light. "Everything Christian is magic," Eric replies with the confidence of someone who's never actually met a Christian before last week. That's why they keep it all locked up in those stone buildings. They debate whether they should keep some of the holy relics for luck, or trade them all for more practical goods like weapons and ale. Ragnar settles the argument by declaring that they'll keep the shiniest ones, and see if they bring good fortune on the next raid. If the Christian god wants his finger bones back, he can come to Norway and discuss terms. Back home, their arrival causes quite a stir. The harbour fills with people wanting to see the exotic loot and hear about the strange land where men wear robes instead of armour and apparently keep their valuables lying around unguarded. The local chieftain, Thorkel the moderately terrible, examines the hall with professional interest. He's particularly impressed by your silver-inlaid prayer book, though he's puzzled by all the tiny pictures. "What's this supposed to be?" he asks, pointing to an illuminated A decorated with angelic figures. "Angels," Ragnar explains. "The Christians believe they fly around, doing good deeds." Thorkel squints at the delicate artwork. They look like very small warriors, with wings. That's actually quite practical. Flying warriors would be useful in battle. This leads to a theological discussion about whether Christians worship flying warriors, and if so, why those warriors didn't show up to defend their own monastery. The conclusion reached by everyone present is that either Christian flying warriors are terrible at their jobs, or the whole angel thing is just decorative. Word of the successful raid spreads quickly through the scattered communities of raiders, traders, and chieftains who make up Viking society. Suddenly, everyone wants to know about these monasteries, stone buildings full of defenseless holy men and unguarded treasure, conveniently located near beaches where longships can land. The younger warriors are particularly excited. Here's a chance for adventure, glory, and profit, all wrapped up in a neat package that doesn't require declaring war on their neighbours or dealing with the complicated politics of local feuds. Leif the extremely young starts planning his own expedition immediately. He's convinced that if one monastery contained this much loot, there must be dozens more just waiting to be discovered. It's like finding out that somewhere across the sea, there's an entire country where people leave their doors unlocked and their valuables in plain sight. The stories grow with each telling. By the time they reach the outlying settlements, the Lindisfarne raid has become an epic tale of hundreds of warriors battling armies of monks who shot lightning from their fingers and commanded flocks of trained seagulls. The fact that Ragnar and his 12 companions looted the place in a couple of hours and sailed away with minimal casualties becomes irrelevant to the narrative. Thorkel the Moderately Terrible calls a feast to celebrate the successful raid and to discuss future opportunities. The hall fills with warriors, their wives, their children, and anyone else who wants to hear about the magical land where Christians keep their gold in boxes and apparently never learn to fight back. Over roasted meat and strong ale, plans begin to form. If there's one undefended monastery, there are probably more. If the Christians are as helpless as they appear, raiding season just got a lot more interesting. You, of course, know none of this. You're still trying to rebuild your scriptorium and explain to visiting bishops why your monastery's entire collection of sacred relics has mysteriously vanished. But across the North Sea, in smoky halls lit by firelight, men with impressive beards are looking at maps and making plans. The Viking Age has officially begun, and you were just the opening act. 6 months after the Lindisfarne raid, you've managed to rebuild parts of your monastery and attract a few new monks brave enough, or naive enough, to join a community that's recently discovered it makes an excellent target for overseas raiders. You've also installed better locks, though you suspect these will be about as effective against determined Vikings as your prayers were last time. You're copying a replacement manuscript for one of the books that became a Viking napkin, when Brother Thomas rushes in with news that makes your carefully maintained quill skip across the parchment. "Ships," he gasps. "On the horizon. Coming this way." This time, you don't waste time debating whether they're traders or pilgrims. You grab your most important manuscripts, stuff them into a waterproof bag you've prepared for exactly this purpose, and head for the boat you've been keeping ready on the far side of the island. Because you're many things, but you're not stupid enough to get caught twice. But these ships sail past Lindisfarne without stopping. They're heading for other targets now, other monasteries that haven't yet learned to keep escape boats ready and their treasures buried. The raid on Lindisfarne wasn't an isolated incident. It was a proof of concept, a successful business model, a demonstration that the North Sea isn't a barrier, it's a highway, and England is conveniently located at the end of it, with a "Please rob me" sign hanging over the coastline. Ragnar's success has inspired imitators, competitors, and entrepreneurs of the axe-wielding variety. Some raids go better than others. The monastery at Jarrow puts up more of a fight, partly because they've heard about Lindisfarne, and partly because Brother Aelfred used to be a soldier before he found God, and still remembers which end of a sword to hold. Other raids are less successful. One group of Vikings gets lost in fog and ends up attacking a fortified manor house instead of a monastery, discovering too late that secular nobles are considerably better armed and significantly less forgiving than monks. They retreat with nothing but bruises and a valuable lesson about the importance of proper navigation. But for every failed raid, there are 2 successful ones. The pattern Lindisfarne established: fast ships, surprise attacks, undefended targets, quick escapes, proves to be depressingly effective across the British Isles. Kings like Aethelred continue to react with the same mixture of outrage and incompetence that marked their response to the original raid. They call meetings, issue proclamations, and order more prayers while completely failing to address the fundamental problem. They're fighting 8th century land-based warfare against people who've mastered 8th century naval tactics. Some rulers try building coastal fortifications. Others attempt to negotiate. A few even try hiring their own Vikings to fight the raiders, which works about as well as you'd expect, when you're essentially paying one group of wolves to fight another group of wolves over the same flock of sheep. You watch all this unfold from your rebuilt monastery, which now includes a watchtower, an escape tunnel, and a very good hiding place for anything too valuable to lose and too holy to abandon. You've become an expert in the fine art of strategic retreat, and you're not ashamed of it. The other monks look to you for guidance now because you're the one with experience. You're the veteran of the Viking Age, the survivor of Lindisfarne, the monk who lived through the day everything changed. "Will they come back?" asks Brother Peter, who joined your community last month and still thinks Christianity is a peaceful religion. You look out at the North Sea, calm and grey under the evening sky, and consider your answer. Somewhere out there, in longhouses that smell of smoke and ambition, men are sharpening their axes and studying the tides. They're telling stories of undefended treasures and monks who run away instead of fighting. They're looking at maps and making plans. Oh yes, you tell Brother Peter. They'll be back. They'll all be back. And they will be. For the next 2 centuries, those dragon-proud ships will appear on horizons across Europe, carrying men who've turned raiding into an art form and expansion into a way of life. They'll establish kingdoms, found cities, and change the course of history. But that's a story for another night. Tonight, the monastery is quiet. Your manuscripts are safe, and your escape boat is ready if needed. The fire in the scriptorium burns warm and steady, casting dancing shadows on the walls where you've hung maps showing all the places Vikings have been spotted recently. You dip your quill in ink and return to your copying. The work continues, as it always has, as it always will. Somewhere across the dark water, the next generation of raiders is learning to row, to fight, and to navigate by the stars. But for now, all is peaceful. The waves lap gently against the shore. The wind whispers through the abbey walls, and if you listen carefully to the silence, you can almost hear the sound of the Viking age settling in for a long, comfortable stay. Sleep well now. Don't worry about the boats on the horizon. Don't think about the sound of axes on wooden doors. Don't wonder what that distant thunder might really be. Everything's going to be just fine, totally fine. The dragons are probably sleeping too. Good night. Thank you for listening one last time. May your sleep be deep, your dreams quiet, and your mind at peace. Good night.